second year, super naive grad student whose goal now that she knows you can study happiness is like, I'm thinking to myself, I don't like feeling sad. I don't like feeling anxious. I don't like feeling down. So why don't I just figure out how to get rid of all of those feelings and just be happy all the time? So when I first started studying happiness, my goal was to figure out how to be happy all the time. Then I got into the literature. And sometimes in the literature, it's called like sort of the dark side of happiness, where what we see is that people that try to be happy all the time end up being less happy than other people.
Interesting.
And when I first read that, I was like, wait a second, like, how can that be? Like, I thought about like weight loss, right? Like if your weight loss goal is, X amount of pounds, even if you don't get there, like at least you're trending in the right direction is what I thought, right? But then I thought about it some more, rethought it. Thank you, Adam Grant. And what I realized is that what happens when we don't reach a goal? Like if someone was to take a microphone and put it in our head and people heard the self-talk that we have going on, we get hard on ourselves, we get down on ourselves, right? We're not that kind to ourselves sometimes. And so what I learned is that the goal in life is not to be happy all the time. It's impossible to be happy all the time. So if we set the goal to be happy all the time, we've set an impossible goal. So we're never going to reach it. And so really in terms of healthy psychological functioning, it's about embracing a full spectrum of emotions, right? Like if we're at a funeral, it doesn't make sense to be happy. Grief makes sense. Sadness makes sense, whatever it is. So that, just to sort of circle back to your question, I'm not happy all the time, but that's not the point. And the reality is that we all have bad days, myself included. And that's part of being human. So two things on that. One is when we're having a bad day, and we've all had them, if you've ever tried to be happy through when you're having a bad day, right? Like just sort of put on a smile, put on your rose-colored glasses and just like fake it till you make it.
You end up feeling worse.
What ends up happening? You feel worse.
And
you're more
so
drained,
tired.
right? You have less energy. It doesn't work. So in research, sometimes we use the term toxic positivity, right? Which is like when someone tells you, oh, just like look on the bright side, keep your chin up, like whatever sort of platitude they want to throw at you. But what we see is that toxic positivity leads to emotional suppression. So when we're actually not feeling our emotions, and when we suppress our emotions, they don't go away. They actually get stronger. We call this amplification. And so instead of trying to be happy, it's really about embracing a spectrum of emotions. And like, to be honest, like I will sometimes just have a day and there's not a particular cause. Like sometimes we can identify our bad mood or why we're unhappy for a specific reason, but sometimes I'll just have a day where I'm just a little bit grumpy or whatever. I now give myself the grace to have a bad day. And maybe that means that I'm not as productive that day, or maybe that day means that I change my plan for what I'm going to do and just chill or, take some time for me, because the next day I always wake up with more energy, right? We have to give ourselves the grace and the time to be, and we all have bad days. And so really, I think a lot of times when we're feeling more challenging emotions, like sadness, like depression, like anxiety, we think that they're bad because we're not as familiar with them, but they're just different, right? And sometimes those emotions, like I never use the word positive or negative when I'm talking about emotions, because an emotion isn't inherently positive or negative. It's information, right?
Yeah.
If you're feeling stressed or anxious, but you were unaccountable to something at work, that's probably a signal that you weren't responsible, or that you didn't do what you were saying you're going to do. So I love that you asked this question. We all can't be happy, and myself included, we all have bad days, and we have to give ourselves the grace to be human on each and every day, the days that we're happy and the days that we're not feeling happy.
I was just going to kind of wrap up a thought there of like, so in that case, maybe a gratitude practice is good when you're feeling grateful, but like this might speak to a reason for like a more general journaling practice, where like just whatever you're feeling that day, if you're wrestling with like this emotion of like today was a hard day, being able to just get that and acknowledge that in a journal, like that can be very cathartic.
Yeah. And I think that this speaks to, there's not a one right formula or one right way. So some days you might just be sort of in a weird funk, and maybe focusing on something you're grateful for shifts your mindset, and then your mood is different. And on some days, maybe you're not, and it's better to do, sort of stream of consciousness writing, or maybe that day it's better to just go like, I used to teach yoga to UFC fighters in university. So every once in a while, I just want to go like hit some bags, or
That's
just
great.
do some like boxing with someone. So maybe it's a day that like you're upset, and maybe that's a better outlet. So it's different, right? And that's where the piece about learning about ourselves is so important. The other thing is, sometimes when we're having a bad day, one of the best things that we can do is go do something nice for someone else. Because often when we're so in our own bad mood, we're so internally focused that taking the focus off me, whatever it is, even if we're in a bad mood, and just like, how can I be in a place to help someone else can sometimes be a great way. Sometimes we just need to shift our mood, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes, you're in a bad mood and you can put on like a funny, like comedy show and then you're feeling better after. Or some days it's like, today I need to quit my day. It's different all the time, right?
Yeah.
So finding those things that work for us, knowing that there's no perfect formula, there's no one thing that's going to work every time. It's really about sort of getting curious with ourselves, like, what do I feel that I need right now, and sort of giving ourselves the flexibility to sort of answer that
To roll
question
with
every
that.
time.
Yeah. I kind of had a little bit of a kind of follow-up question after talking about like, what do you do like when you're just like having a bad day, not happy? But
Yeah.
I had this thought when you were kind of describing like you have the wide range of emotions. So I'm like a huge Brene Brown fan. And I love her quote, you cannot selectively numb emotion. And when she talks about feeling being like on a scale, and like because you were talking about like feeling happy, you're just, I want to feel happy. I don't want to feel anything else. Right. And if like this is the middle, the way she described it, there's a scale and one end is happiness. And at one hand, blissful happiness, I should say. And the other is like the absolute pits of despair. If you're numbing all of this stuff that's negative, she like visually showcased it as, you're coming inward towards the middle on the negative side, but this positive happy side simultaneously is going at the same speed as you're like trying to protect yourself and numb yourself from all of these negative things that you never want to feel, because all you want to feel is happiness. You actually lessen your capacity to feel happiness. And I was reminded of that when that's what you were saying, because I feel like you were basically saying the exact same thing with different words. You're like, if all you're focused on is being happy, you're actually going to be less happy, right? Because you have to kind of like numb and ignore other emotions that you're likely feeling, you're just rejecting, right? There's no space for it. And I just love that. Yeah, I love that analogy. And because it's tough and it sucks. It's been really impactful for me as a parent too, because when my kids are feeling sadness, and I also went through a divorce and had kids at the same time. And the thing I wanted the most was to save my children from that pain, and I couldn't. That was so hard. I'm going to get emotional.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But it was so hard because I wanted to save them from that. But I realized the best thing that I could do is just be present with them in that pain, and celebrate the joy that we could. And so that kind of leads me a little bit to the next question, is like, when you are like, it's not just you're having oh, sorry, Dirk. You're having a bad time, you're going through it in some way. And it's not just the day, and there's something hanging over you, whether it's you're going through a divorce, or you have a sick family member, or there's just been a huge change in your family situation, or you lost somebody, whatever it may be. It's not, I'm just having a bad day. It's there's a weight that you're carrying and you're holding. So when that's the case, how do we cultivate happiness in our lives?
So I don't think that all situations require us or necessitate us to be happy, right? Like, if we're going through a divorce and it's painful, like, it doesn't make sense to be happy.
Right.
Sometimes, like, you think about it, or you people say, like, if you don't have the highs, you can't appreciate the lows. And not that you need those or they're necessary, but I think that we have to give ourselves the grace to know that we can't be happy all the time. But like you said, there's a big distinction between just like having a bad day and taking a night, or like going to the spa, or hanging out with your dog all afternoon is going to kind of fix that, versus going through really hard things. Part of the reality of being a human in the world is, at some point, we are going to face hard things.